being, obviously coming from outside the Asian community, you may or may not have guessed, is just showing guys that things are possible. Like a lot of the misunderstandings, a lot of the things that, like we talk about this great cycle, or this terrible cycle, but it's this huge thing that keeps going on, where Asian guys that we bring into our programs think, oh, well, white girls don't want to date Asian guys. And then we talk to white girls, and white girls are like, well, Asian guys never approach white girls, so why would we get to date them? And so we go back to those Asian guys and go, well, why don't you approach white girls? And they go, well, we never see any white girls with Asian guys, so why would we approach them? And we go to the white girls and we go, well, why aren't you ever with Asian guys? And they're like, well, they never approach us. And it turns into this big cycle. And for me, like, probably like 60 or 75% of the Asian guys that I've worked with, like, that I've, walked over to the most attractive girl in the bar, and, she's been maybe tall and blonde or tall and brunette or whatever, and I've said, hey, this is my friend, Jin or whatever, and she's been like, oh, hi, how's it going? I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna get out of here, go to the bathroom, and like they talked for 25 minutes, and, like they were, like race had no issue, and kind of blowing that up for a lot of guys is it's a very eye-opening experience. It's something that a lot of people don't think about,
It's basically about humanizing both groups of people. Again, there's just a large barrier, like not to every Asian guy, but to a significant portion. Like when we were being followed by Nightline, and one of the students was a really good-looking Asian guy. All right, he had never dated outside of his race, but all of his friends made fun of him for trying to. Like all of his Asian friends made fun of him. It's like, they're gonna laugh at you. They're gonna say that you have a small penis. And again, it doesn't happen. This issue doesn't affect every Asian guy, but it affects enough that it is an issue. And you had a question?
Yeah. So like the stats that you showed before that like Asian men tend to like get married later or like not at all. I feel like a lot of times it's like Asian guys, they wait until like they're financially stable or like something, and then they get married. And so that's why they like tend to get married later. And then also like as a result of that, like divorce rates are also lower. So I guess like isn't that a good thing? But then you're only focusing on the negative aspect.
No, that's a good point. I guess the only counter I have to that is, do you want to be that 30-year-old virgin? I think that a lot of guys, and let me go like, whenever, I don't know, have you guys been to like the Better Asian Man blog? Like this is one of our guys, William, kind of does part-time instructing for us, works on Wall Street. He literally got himself financially secure and he wanted to get married, but he could not meet anybody because he did not know the process of how to meet people because no one had ever taught him, right? If you're to say, I'm going to wait until I'm financially secure, right, as opposed to your peers who are growing at, like, they've started to learn how to be, socially intelligent in dating at a significantly earlier age than you. And you're starting at, they started dating at 15, you started dating at 30. You're working at an incredible dating deficit knowledge compared to your peers. I think, honestly, I think part of it is like I run into a lot of those older Asian guys that are financially secure now. They want to date, but they can't find anybody. So most of their peers are simply settling. Like literally, they're simply settling for whatever woman is there, not because they want to, but because they have to.
And absolutely focusing on the negative. It's how you get change. It's kind of like how many people are killed by drunk drivers. How many people. They say interesting fact about drunk driving is they say that before someone gets a DUI, they've driven between 800 and 1,200 times they've driven drunk before they've actually gotten pulled over and gotten accused of it. And so the amount of people that are driving drunk, the amount of times that someone has driven drunk versus the amount of times that someone's been killed by that are super, super low. But in this particular case, it's one of those scenarios where we're going to focus on the negative so we can swoop in and make it into a positive. We're providing a service. Just for me speaking for purely the dating aspect of it, we're trying to provide a service that even if we, I've worked with guys that are great with women that just want to learn more. Even if we give our services to people that are good with women, or that have been married, or that have steady girlfriends, it can't hurt. It can't make anything worse. And I very sincerely believe that these are a set of skills that all men should learn. Rich, poor, Asian.
It goes back into play that emotional social intelligence. When you have it, it affects other areas of your life, that confidence, whether it's getting the job or negotiating that salary, or the pay raise. All those things affect you. That confidence speaks throughout. Someone, you had a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
So earlier you were talking about the bamboo ceiling, and I was wondering if you ever experienced that yourself in this industry.
The dating industry?
Yeah.
I try not to speak ill of my competitors. But one thing I've noticed is, ever since I started doing this, obviously a lot of people have examined, how did I simply, go from a random blog into this, becoming essentially the leader of this dating niche. And what I've seen is almost every single major dating coaching company now has an Asian representative. Call it affirmative action, if you will. But they now have someone that can say, hey, I've got an Asian too, come join us. And that's fine. That allows someone that can speak, to you and I with the same cultural similarities. Because ultimately, a lot of guys, a dating coach who is tall, good-looking, white, he knows nothing about getting punched in the face when I was in 4th grade and getting called a gook. I can relate to someone who has been called racist names. And it helps, for I think everybody in a capitalistic society, that other businesses are catching on and they're trying to be inclusive. Because, before me, it was completely ignored. The entire idea of race was completely ignored. Someone have you asked a question yet?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try someone new.
So I noticed when you were speaking, you made a point to occasionally specify East Asian or Indian or so on and so forth. I was wondering if you could speak to your experiences, kind of just regarding this idea of Pan-Asian identity, Pan-Asian identity, and barriers to dating, even within the race. Maybe stereotypes or perceptions.
Yeah. Now we're getting into the very micro level of issues. There is no real Pan-Asian, except when the fact that we are identified from the outside. I mean, one of my coaches, Johnny Wolf, he's Taiwanese, and when he was talking to me, he's like, until I met you, JC, I'd never considered myself Asian American. I was just Taiwanese American. All right. It's only until when we go out into the club and we're all but 10 Asian guys, and we grab 10 non-Asian women, take them from white guys, and bring them over, but everyone in the club is staring like they want to kill us. Then that's when we're all Asian, because it doesn't matter if one's Indian, one's Paki, one's Japanese or Korean. We're just Asian to everybody else in the club. But there is some inter-Asian prejudices where an East Asian might not want to date an Indian. It's there. I've heard of the entire conflict of Korean not wanting to date Japanese. That's a very specific set of circumstances. Unfortunately, we don't really deal with that because we generally try to address more of the macro issues. So, you had a question?
Yeah. What do you do about the friend zone?
The dreaded friend zone. Don't get in the first place.
I'm on a date with a girl right now.
And she's wearing a blue belt. The dreaded friend zone. First of all, she perceives you in a certain way, obviously. Now, I'm going to take this circumstance, because if you're in a social circle of college, you cannot make significant changes to it. All right, at least overnight. Otherwise, people are going to notice, and that kind of drastic change in your behavior or what you're trying to do is going to be very obvious, and it's going to backfire. All right, but generally speaking, to get out of the friend zone, she has to perceive you in a different light. All right, if you're coming off the nice, friendly guy, she has to look at you in a different light. One of the easiest ways to do that, all right, and it's kind of the chicken or the egg. It's going to take time for a guy to do this, but this has been done effectively many times, is to throw a house party for the coolest people, the coolest guys, because cool guys want to hang out with cool guys, and with a lot of girls. The concept of social proof. Right? When a girl sees a man surrounded by other women, he automatically becomes more attractive. This is not a logical, conscious decision. A girl looks at that and thinks he's attractive. He's more attractive than if he didn't have girls around him. So then the fact that you're leading a bunch of men, you're having fun, she's going to look at you in a different light. Because I'm going to presume you got placed in the friend zone because you weren't sexual. You might not have been in a leadership position or alpha or dominant. And so you want to do something where she looks at you in a different way. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've been in the community for a few years, and each year is sort of a different thing. It used to be mystery method, then 1 year it's natural game versus this or that, direct game, indirect game. What do you think is the growing trend, sort of nowadays? It's
I don't really care.
I'm serious, yeah.
No. The thing is, I generally try to.
Online game.
Yeah.
It's a simple answer to
Text
your
to
question.
sex. No. I generally just try to avoid that simply because there is so much conflicting knowledge out there. For every individual, you have to look at what fits you. And some guys are going to be more flashy. Some guys are going to be more indirect, whatever. Way we teach is we tend to be very comprehensive. That's why we try to do it. I tend to emphasize more direct style because it works a lot for Asians, and I encourage it not exclusively, but become competent at this level of interaction with women. So I guess to sum up, I don't really keep with the local PUA fads.